All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Good to see you again. We are very excited about this next panel with the role of the state. And you see our agency leadership up here. And so I really want to jump right in and, go to we're going to do kind of discussion-based format here. But really wanted to hear from, what are each of your agencies doing to help enable the ZEV market, with leveraging infrastructure. And so we'll hand it over here to Chair Randolph first from CARB, which I'm very excited to have here. And Chair Randolph, it's to you.
Good morning, Tyson. It's great to see you and really excited to be part of this discussion. The state is undertaking so much work to support zero-emission infrastructure planning and deployment. And we know that now's the time for zero-emission vehicles. The need, the technology, the policy direction, all of that is poised and ready to go. We at CARB and across the state agencies you're going to hear from today are all hands on deck to create this clean transportation future and the charging and fueling infrastructure needed to support it. Transitioning to zero-emission transportation sector is critical for achieving our air quality and climate goals. And in California, we've done so much to reduce vehicle pollution and protect public health. But more needs to be done, as over 90% of Californians still breathe unhealthy air. And every year, California cities top the most smoggiest cities in the nation. Medium and heavy duty vehicles count for a substantial portion of NOx and diesel PM and greenhouse gas emissions in California, which impact public health and the climate and impact the communities that are of communities of color and low-income communities living and working near ports, rail yards, along freight corridors. Zero-emission vehicles and the infrastructure to support them are absolutely critical to mitigating the impacts of criteria and toxic pollutants and the effects of climate change. And we have a big challenge ahead of us. I don't know how many of you read this past weekend a column in the LA Times by Steve Lopez talking about deciding not to purchase a battery electric vehicle essentially because of range anxiety and being nervous about going on reporting trips and not having a way to charge. And it's these barriers that we really need to overcome as we do this deployment. And so we need to have that charging and fueling infrastructure in place so that buyers are ready to purchase the huge new variety of zero-emission vehicles that are coming on into the market. Here at CARB, we are working in both our regulatory space and our incentives. As many of you know, we passed the Advanced Clean Truck Rule that requires manufacturers to transition from diesel to zero-emissions trucks starting in 2024 and to achieve 100% zero-emission sales by 2045. We're working on the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation for medium and heavy-duty truck and bus fleets, including last-mile delivery and drayage, that will help ensure the uptake of these vehicles. And all of this is complemented by our suite of incentive programs, which tackle specific sectors and different stages of technology commercialization and help to promote equity. And our Advanced Clean Cars rule, Advanced Clean Cars 2 rule, is moving forward in the light duty space. And just this morning, I had the opportunity to testify at US EPA's hearing where they are considering lifting or giving us back our waiver and doing away with the Safe One rules that the Trump administration adopted. So we are advocating at the federal level, and we are working hard with our sister agencies to deploy infrastructure, looking at the investing $800 million from the Volkswagen settlement into infrastructure, and continuing to work closely, as I mentioned, with other agencies and with Tyson at GoBiz to make sure that we are coordinating closely and moving forward with deploying both vehicles and infrastructure. And we're excited. We recently created a position, Annalisa Bevan, you'll hear from her later today, who is really spearheading that close coordination with other agencies so that we can make sure and be tightly coordinated as we deploy this infrastructure. And as I think we'll talk about a little bit later this morning, we're super excited about the governor's budget in support of infrastructure and vehicle deployment, and excited to talk about that. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation this morning.
Thank you very much, Chair Randolph. And so Commissioner Monahan, there's, Chair Randolph went through, there's a lot of regulation coming, a lot of market development coming. And what's the Energy Commission doing on the infrastructure front? It's really a, lead infrastructure agency.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that we are so coordinated that we're even coordinated in what we're wearing. That's how coordinated the state is. So, I think as Chair Randolph and Tyson have emphasized, we're all in this together. As a former basketball player, I like to say we're like in full court press in trying to make sure that we can accelerate the market and do it in a way that benefits all Californians, and especially those living in disadvantaged communities, low-income communities that are really suffering disproportionately from air pollution. As Chair Randolph said, I mean, air pollution is a major driver, and it disproportionately impacts Californians, people of color, low-income families. We have solid data that says that they are more exposed to harmful diesel pollution. So when we zero out emissions from diesel vehicles, we're also helping these communities breathe easier. And I think that, personally is a big motivator for me. I know it's a motivator for Chair Randolph as well. And I think all of us are aligned in that mission. So, the Energy Commission is the lead for infrastructure. I just put that in quotes because, of course, the Public Utilities Commission is very involved in this. And, the Air Resources Board, as they pass regulations, they're trying to make sure that there's sufficient infrastructure for fleets to be able to meet these regulations. And we at the Energy Commission have a clean transportation program that funds about $100 million per year in near and zero emission fuels and infrastructure. So we're really trying to be very disciplined in terms of leaning in on our areas, our sweet spots. So we are, the sweet spot when it comes to the Energy Commission is really the vehicles and the fuels. And we want to do, as we electrify transportation, we want to do it in a way that supports our clean grid goals. So if we charge our vehicles at the right time of day, as our chair likes to say, we could have an EV happy hour where EVs are plugging into sunshine that we would otherwise be curtailing. That helps reduce rates for all ratepayers, and it should help the EV driver get a lower rate too if he or she charges their vehicle at the right time of day. So there's this whole, I think, more complicated equation when it comes to refueling, especially battery electric vehicles. So our investment plan, we have laid out a vision for the remainder of the program, which is through 2023. And what our emphasis in the early years has been light duty ZEV, zero emission vehicle infrastructure. In the later years, it's medium and heavy duty. And in fact, we have more money, at least for now, in that sector, in large part because of the air quality implications of that. But I will say we need zero emission vehicle infrastructure for both light and medium and heavy duty vehicles. We need a big ramp up. We need like a Manhattan project when it comes to accelerated deployment of zero emission vehicle infrastructure, and that's for both fuel cells and battery electric infrastructure. On the fuel cell side, recently we expanded our solicitations for public hydrogen infrastructure to include medium and heavy duty vehicles because we see that as a real opportunity. We have, in fact, 13 stations from our most recent solicitation for public stations are for medium and heavy duty. We have 5 private stations. So this is something where we're going to continue to utilize our programmatic funds to accelerate zero emission vehicle infrastructure for both battery and fuel cell electric vehicles. So I think I'll stop there because I'm actually looking forward to the conversation with my partner agencies in this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Commissioner Monahan. And so maybe we'll go over to Commissioner Rechtschaffen. And so obviously the PUC and the utilities have a huge role to play. So if we can shine some light there.
Thank you, Tyson. It's a pleasure to be here to share the stage with my colleagues. The PUC is part of the mosaic of state agencies that are involved in the aggressive push in California to get to our zero-emission vehicle goals. We regulate the transmission and infrastructure for about 3/4 of the state, the largest state investor-owned utilities. And we engage in a lot of efforts in very close concert with the Air Resources Board and the Energy Commission, trying to follow and implement the CARB rules and pay close attention to the Energy Commission's infrastructure planning, where they are indeed the lead. We've authorized a number of programs for infrastructure investment for utilities, now totaling about $1.5 billion, just to give you a sense of that. In the entire United States, the rest of the country is probably authorized a total of $2.5 billion. Most of the amount we've authorized, about half, is dedicated to medium and heavy duty vehicles. We've had about $44 million for public fast charging, $9 million for off-road electric vehicles. And this, of course, is intended to build out the grid, the EV make-readies, and in some cases, the actual charging equipment themselves. We've been trying to make things easier to streamline the infrastructure investment process. We're in the midst of a comprehensive review that we've called the development of a transportation electrification framework, which has been out in draft form for about a year. And that under that framework, the utilities will develop strategic long-term plans that outline investment for a number of years. And once those are approved, individual programs that fit into those plans can be go forward in a much more rapid way. And we hope that will fuel a continuous cycle of infrastructure build out that we'll need. Just as a matter of interest, yesterday we issued a proposed decision saying that in the near term, while these longer term investment plans are developed, we still want to promote investment in priority areas, one of which is medium and heavy duty charging, so that these programs can continue to go forward as the utilities build their larger strategic plans. We're also in the process of implementing legislation that California passed last year, known as AB 841. And the purpose of that is also to facilitate investment on the utility side of the distribution grid, to make it clear that those investments could be recovered by utilities. And hopefully this reduces the uncertainty and risk that customers face when converting to electric. They know that on the distribution side, at least, if they ask for those upgrades, the utilities will pay for those and cover those. And all of the utilities in the state have proposed new rules that we're now in the process of reviewing that would implement this statute. We're going to talk about other roles that the agencies play. Of course, a very important role for us is to minimize the impacts on the grid of electrification, to make sure that we have upgrades in the places we need them, to make sure that we have charging at the right times, as Commissioner Monahan mentioned, to avoid undue peak load impacts. We also play a big role in helping to set rates. It's critically important that electric charging rates be affordable for medium and heavy duty customers, and that we incentivize charging at the right times of the day for that EV happy hour or otherwise, because if we don't, we can not just increase the costs of charging, but the impacts on the grid. So we can also talk about that. And we are working on a critical next step in transportation electrification development with the Energy Commission and others, and that's the development of vehicle grid integration strategies. And vehicle grid integration just refers to a sort of a generic set of strategies that better integrate charging with the needs of the grid, and they have a lot of benefits, and that's something that can help a great deal in this sector that we can talk about in some of our discussion. I do want to say, I think we have the dream team. At least I'm the sub on the dream team with Commissioner Monahan and Chair Randolph. We're all working very closely in concert, and our staffs meet very, very regularly. Tyson at GoBiz convenes a regular ZEB Brain Trust and has very detailed and helpful action plans for all of us to follow. And we also meet on our own at the leadership level continually to coordinate as we go forward with this revolution.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. So there's a lot in there, from the high level, kind of speeding things forward to the, implementation, making it more certain that when you're trying to put in infrastructure that the, funding, who pays is sorted out. So it's really helpful stuff. And so what I wanted to do is maybe shift into the funding question. So Chair Randolph teased this, I teased it earlier too, and I think a lot of people are read in, but I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about this. This is a big proposal from Governor Newsom and the California Comeback Plan. And Chair Randolph, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what that means and what we're hoping to achieve with those investments. And then Commissioner Monahan, love you to weigh in as well. And then Commissioner Rexhoff, and especially as how the utility investments complement those funding.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, as Commissioner Monahan mentioned. Like, we need a Manhattan project, right? We need to go big and really get the deployment that we need in the short term, which will then build on itself. So, when the governor released his budget earlier this year, he really leaned in heavily into that with the $1 billion for the Energy Commission, and the May revise of the California budget added to that quite a bit. So the total will be $3.2 billion over the next 3 fiscal years to build on the investments in ZEV and ZEV infrastructure. This is a recognition that zero-emission technologies are commercially available and ready to scale, and it is the optimal time to double down. So the proposed package will really provide the resources necessary to accelerate this transition. On the CARB end, a total of $2 billion is proposed over the next 3 years. And the investments are designed to scale the ZEV market towards sustainability in those key vehicle segments that are really ready for that fast on-ramp. So in addition to what was originally identified, the May revise added $947 million in new funding for heavy-duty vehicles. And this funding is going to put 1,000 drayage trucks, zero-emission drayage trucks on the road, 1,000 zero-emission transit buses, 1,000 zero-emission school buses onto California roads. And this is really going to provide support for transit agencies whose budgets have been hard hit. And of course, school children are a sensitive population. There are over 20,000 school buses operating in California, and only 1% of them are currently zero emission. So this investment will be huge for school children in California. And as for the drayage trucks, about 8,000 diesel drayage trucks need to turn over between now and 2023, according to our rules. So it's particularly timely to make a concerted effort to help those trucks transition right to zero emission. So we're pretty excited about that. And the budget also includes $40 million for CARB, and that's $65 million total to CARB and CEC, to fully fund the oversubscribed joint zero emission drayage truck and infrastructure pilot, which is an excellent pilot program, which really tries to streamline the deployment of drayage trucks and infrastructure together, and make it easier for participants in that program to really take advantage of that funding. And the light duty space has some additional funding as well. $650 million for it, so that's a total of $800 million for light duty adoption and mobility. And that's going to be really important to expand our Clean Cars for All program statewide, which provides funding to low-income Californians living in or near disadvantaged communities to scrap their old car and replace it with a new or used advanced technology car. And $400 million is proposed for consumer rebates for new ZEV purchases through the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, or CVRP, over the next 3 fiscal years, with some of that funding targeted to low and medium income vehicle buyers. And this is layered on top of our existing Clean Fuels Reward program, which provides on the hood incentives for new light duty vehicles from our low carbon fuel standard program. And so we're really pushing these funds out through existing programs so that it's efficient. It's our programs that people already know how to use and they're familiar with, so we can get those dollars out quickly and get those vehicles deployed as quickly as possible.
Great, and then thank you, Chair, and then Commissioner Monahan, to you, like the connection too, right? Because one of the things for you to drive home is like the idea that we're investing in vehicles, but we're coupling it with infrastructure, and so maybe you can highlight some of that coordination.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to call her Leanne and Cliff, because these are friends. So I'm just going to be more friendly on this little screen. So I just want to make 3 quick points, because Leanne did an excellent job summarizing the governor's proposed budget. One is that the budget also would reauthorize, his proposal would reauthorize the funding that supports our program to build out zero-emission vehicle infrastructure. So the program sunsets in 2023. The proposal would extend that program through 2035, and it would just provide this like durable signal that we are invested in the long run and making sure that there's sufficient infrastructure for zero-emission vehicles. So that's point number 1 to emphasize. Point number 2 is the budget contains $500 million for zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, and our thinking is that we would use $300 million to fill the gap in light-duty vehicle charging that we see in the near term, and $200 million would be for medium and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicle infrastructure. So that's, a big infusion on top of the 1,000 drayage trucks, 1,000 school buses. 1,125 drayage trucks, 1,000 school buses, and 1,000 transit buses. And then the third point, which is what you were talking about, Tyson, is that we are committed, together with the Air Resources Board, to make this easy for grantees. We don't want grantees to be like, oh, we got to apply to CARB for this, and then we apply to the Energy Commission for that, and then it's a big fat headache, and then we have to do, we want the big fat headache to be on our side to align our programs and make it easy for the grantees. We're thinking through what needs to be public, what needs to be private. We're doing analysis around that, but we're committed to making it easy for our grantees to move to apply for these grants.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. One point too I want to bring up, there's also, maybe you could talk a little bit about the manufacturing piece of it as an economic development.
Yeah, happy to. So there's $250 million. Look at, he's like my prompter over there. We have $250 million reserved for manufacturing grants, and that is really, California is really the new Michigan when it comes to electric vehicles. We want to foster that. We have our electric vehicles were our #1 export last year. This is an opportunity, both in the build out of zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and in the actual manufacturing of zero-emission vehicles and their infrastructure. We want to make California just like the place to come, and so the proposal includes $250 million for grants to be able to support that.
Excellent. And Commissioner Reschoff, and I think it's a lot of money coming in. The utilities have a huge role to play, and I think you talked about it in your points. Wanted to create space for you if anything you wanted to add on the budget.
I would only reinforce what Commissioner Monahan said, which is we need a Manhattan project. And we've authorized, as I mentioned, over $1.5 billion in infrastructure spending, but there's an enormous need, and it's critical that the sources of funding be multiple, not just California ratepayers. because they're already confronting significant ratepayer pressure from wildfire mitigation costs and other needs to deal with aging infrastructure. So the budget is a very, very welcome set of additions to the infrastructure needs we have. And we will dovetail our policies and our directives to the utilities based on the investments that our sister agencies make.
Excellent. And then I
think it's an important point to raise that Cliff is a more formal person than me, so he'll call me Commissioner, but I'll just call him
Cliff. Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. No, I think that sounds good. So in the lead up, just to pivot a little bit, but also build on what Commissioner Rechtschaffen is talking about, and the lead up to this event, we asked people to submit questions, and some of the questions that came, I think, were really constructive. But one of them was about resilience, right? And so we're making these big investments, but at the end of the day, especially in commercial enterprises, people who are adopting zero-emission vehicles need to know that they work and they will work for them, that the hydrogen's available, that the electricity is available. And so I want to throw out in, maybe we'll go to Commissioner Rechtschaffen first here, but what are we doing as a state, or what can we do to help increase resilience and adaptation to make sure that these things, that these investments prove themselves in the commercial marketplace as reliable?
Well, we're doing a lot. It's a very legitimate concern. I should note, though, just as an aside, even if I'm more formal, I can still try to be a wise guy, which is that, EVs will break down a lot less than internal combustion engines. They have fewer moving parts. They require a lot less maintenance. So that's one form of resilience. It's easier to know that they will be around. But it is a critical issue as we're making this transformation. People have to not just get over range anxiety, but they have to believe that the electric system is reliable and resilient and it will be there. And that's a particularly great challenge given the outages we've experienced, both because of wildfires themselves, extreme heat storms, as well as proactive public safety power shutoffs. For those outside of California, those are the preemptive steps that utilities take to de-energize lines during periods of extreme weather events, very high wind, where there's a possibility that limbs or vegetation could strike live wires and ignite wildfires. So we have to deal with this problem. And we do have an all hands on deck strategy throughout the state, and Governor Newsom's budget has a lot that tries to deal with wildfire resilience and promoting safer practices to reduce the risk of wildfire. For our part at the PUC, we've been laser focused on reducing the risks from wildfire events, requiring the utilities to adopt comprehensive and detailed wildfire mitigation strategies, to use techniques like machine learning and sophisticated cameras and weather stations to predict model fire behavior. We've required them to harden the grid in many ways through using covered conductors, which make lines more resistant to fire, undergrounding where appropriate, sectionalizing lines so that certain circuits can be de-energized and not others, enhanced vegetation management, and so forth. So we're trying to be very proactive on that end. We're also working extremely hard to ensure customer side resilience through programs like a customer side incentive program known as our self-generation incentive program, where we provided deep incentives for customers in high fire threat areas who install batteries that can be used for backup power. We've been promoting the use of microgrids. That's a slow process, but a very, very important process. And we are starting with some incipient programs, including a couple that have just been proposed that will compensate vehicle owners for power that they send back to the grid during outages. And that's another form of energy resilience that is going to be very important in this sector.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, please, Patty.
Well, can I just build on that? Because there were some gems in what Cliff said. And I just want to bring it back to like the real world market. So we got the Ford F-150, which is coming out in an electric version soon. It's called the Lightning. And it's the first electric vehicle that's being like advertised as something that could provide power back to your house. So if your power goes out in your house, instead of buying an expensive battery that doesn't have as much storage, you could actually get a huge amount of storage from your Ford F-150 plugged into your house. They're actually going to sell the kit so that you can just plug it right in and send power back in. So there's something, you know, really transformative about that possibility. And the fact that Ford is saying, hey, this is something that is a benefit to you, and we're going to guarantee our battery, which is a big deal. Like, auto manufacturers didn't want to do that, have a vehicle to grid, have that because it could degrade the battery. But Ford is saying, oh no, we can do this right. And in fact, there's some evidence that it's not going to have impacts on battery degradation. So there's a real opportunity there. We invested as a resilience strategy in over 230 electric school buses that have that capability and are looking at ways that school buses could, you know, when they're sitting idle in the middle of the day or at the end of the day, actually, when we need that power back, that we can charge it in the middle of the day to get that EV happy hour. We can put power back when we need it in the evening when school buses aren't needed. And that would help cash-strapped school districts be able to finance this transition and provide more resilience. So, you know, these are no longer just mobile devices. They're actually power storage devices. They're distributed energy resources. And we're really working hard to be able to capitalize on that. And the Public Utilities Commission, as Cliff said, is working hard to capitalize on it. It's just a huge opportunity, and it's transformative in terms of, you know, what you think a vehicle is now. It's just so much more than just moving from point A to point B.
And I would just add to what Commissioner Monahan said, which is the dynamic really has shifted. And for those of you who've been active in this field, you've heard vehicle grid integration, V to G, as buzzwords for a while, but we are in an inflection point, and a lot of auto manufacturers are not only not resisting anymore, but they're actively promoting the use of their vehicles to providing backup power, as the Ford example indicates. They're now in this game, and they see real benefits to doing it. So it's a very different scene than it was even a few years ago, and we're really on the cusp of something that can provide enormous benefits both to the grid and to the vehicle owners.
Excellent. Well, no, thank you. That's all very helpful, and a lot of great opportunities. I think that's, you know, for the ZEV strategy principle, it's like the resilience and adaptation question. It's not just a challenge; it really is an opportunity, and we're trying to frame it as such. And so, one of the things, just to shift gears quickly, we've got a lot of questions coming in the Q&A about the role of hydrogen, and it's just. And to make it clear, we're talking about electrification, we're talking battery, we're talking fuel cell. But I want to see, like, Chair Randolph, if you had any you know, how hydrogen fits into this piece as a complement to battery electric throughout the sectors.
Yeah, I mean, I will say at CARB, we definitely see hydrogen as a piece of the puzzle, and our incentive programs do incentivize both battery electric and hydrogen. I think it'll be interesting to see how those markets develop, and how it plays out in terms of heavy duty and light duty vehicles, and sort of, you know, how that ends up working. I had a conversation with one of the heavy duty manufacturers, and they were saying that they were leaning heavily into hydrogen in Europe and heavily into electric in the United States, which I thought was very interesting. But I think there's absolutely some huge opportunities there, and I know there's a lot of conversation around making sure that hydrogen infrastructure is absolutely a piece of the puzzle that we need going forward.
Can I also build on that one? Because I do think, you know, for a long time, California has leaned in on hydrogen and fuel cells. The fuel cell partnership has been around for over 20 years. I mean, I think there's no doubt that when it comes to vehicles, California has been the center of gravity for hydrogen for a long time. Now that it's starting to expand into China, into the EU in pockets. But one of the strategies for driving down the price of hydrogen is to use it in different areas. And so the governor's budget also proposes investments in green hydrogen and really looking for opportunities to use it potentially in power and in industry and sort of high heat applications where we don't have ready-made solutions for a zero carbon or low carbon strategy. So that is also, part of this ecosystem of investments that we want to encourage to help drive down the price of hydrogen, which is a critical enabler to fuel cell vehicles.
Great. No, thank you. That's really helpful. And yeah, I think that whole investing in a system, I think, is a good thing for across the for in the battery, in the fuel cell, and hydrogen. It's a system we're trying to create in the ecosystem as well with all the stakeholder development. So thank you for that. And so I want to shift gears a little bit into equity. So we have, make sure that we're putting equity into every decision. But one of the questions that came in, which is a great one, is what are we doing to ensure that our investments are equitable? And I know each of your agencies are doing a lot, but maybe we can go, Commissioner Rechtschaffen, and you can start, and then we can go.
Thank you, Tyson. It's a critical issue. It's one that's obviously a central focus for the governor, and it's imbued throughout the budget and in many of his priorities. We have at the PUC, we have an environmental and social justice action plan, which directs us to prioritize investment in underserved communities throughout our programs. In our EV infrastructure decisions, we've had a very strong focus on reaching underserved communities, which includes tribal communities as well as disadvantaged communities based on scoring from Cal EnviroScreen, which looks at both demographic, socioeconomic conditions, as well as environmental burdens. And all of our investment decisions have required from 25 to 50% of investment be in underserved communities. The most recent 2 or 3 have required 50%. I think that's where we're likely to continue going. We've also provided additional incentives to encourage charging infrastructure in underserved communities through things like higher rebate levels for customers who choose to own their charging equipment in those communities only, because we want to give more options in those communities. We've emphasized higher priority areas for medium and heavy duty investments, including school buses and public transit, and each of the utilities has programs in those areas.
Great. Chair Randolph, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add briefly, I agree with everything Commissioner Rechtschaffen said about the importance of making sure that we deploy the infrastructure in all communities. It's absolutely more challenging to think about multifamily units or folks that are renting houses who may have more charging challenges. So we need to be really, really cognizant of that. And of course, in our incentive programs, like I was mentioning earlier, we're really happy that we will have more funding in Clean Cars for All and in CVRP, so that there are vehicle purchasing opportunities at all income levels.
So I'll just go really quickly and say, when we look at our investments, about half of our investments in the Clean Transportation Program have gone in disadvantaged and low-income communities. But now I think our challenge is really to expand into what is a benefit to low-income and disadvantaged communities, and we're embarking on a process to better define a benefits analysis, because arguably just being located in a disadvantaged and low-income community, there's a benefit there, but is it creating jobs? Is it really helping with mobility for disadvantaged and low-income families? So we're going to be embarking on a deeper dive process for that, and definitely we'll be engaging the other agencies in that dialogue, because I think we want to start really getting clear about what a benefit is, engaging our stakeholder community, including the Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group, in that process, and then tracking that impact. Air quality, I think ARB has been a leader in really tracking that, but that's one important indicator. And just, we want to jobs, and we want to really lay out all these indicators and then start tracking them so we can see the results of our investments and how they really benefit communities.
Well, that's great. And I think just to build on that, ideas are always welcome. We're always looking for ways to improve. And I think capturing those equity investments and making sure that we actually do understand that they are making a difference in people's lives. It's a hard thing to measure. So if people have ideas for how we can get better at that, or ideas for anything really is, but that one in particular, we need a lot of help with. So, I mean,
I just wanted to make a plug for something. So in the interest of tracking, we've been tracking zero-emission vehicle statistics on our zero-emission vehicle dashboard, ZEV dashboard, and we've worked with DMV and their resources board on tracking light-duty vehicle sales and current on-road population. We're trying to get better data for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. We're putting all the infrastructure, both for fuel cells and for battery electric infrastructure, on that ZEV dashboard. So I just encourage folks to go there, use the data, tell us what other data you would like, because we really want to make this transparent, and we want to be held accountable to these market developments.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And so we have just a short amount of time left. And so kind of a lightning round last question. Maybe we'll go in the order: CARB, CEC, PUC, kind of how we started. But really, in relation to big ZEVs, that's what I like to call them, the big ZEVs, like medium and heavy duty. Kind of the two questions. What gives you the most hope, and what keeps you up at night? And any order is fine.
I think what gives me hope is there are a lot of manufacturers out there and a lot of new heavy duty vehicles out there, and they are really poised for deployment. And the other thing that gives me hope, and Commissioner Monahan can add to this, is the coordination that they have funded with the heavy duty manufacturers to make sure that they have a consistent charging platform. So those kind of things that sort of seem small at the beginning really reap a lot of benefits. And I guess what keeps me up at night is that sort of coordination with the infrastructure and the vehicle, because for heavy duty vehicles, it's a long lead time investment, right? You got to plan ahead for it, and timing the infrastructure and the vehicle, getting together at the same time, is not easy. And whatever we as a state can do to further that coordination, we need to do. So that's what I worry about, but I'm super optimistic.
Am I next? Go ahead, next.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So my big hope, what gives me a lot of hope, is that I think this global transition is unstoppable. I think investment is slowing, and California is not alone. This is happening in China. This is happening in the EU. This is happening in India. The investment is happening. I don't think this movement towards zero-emission vehicles will end. What I got also say my little hope, which Chair Randolph mentioned, is that we will avoid in the medium and heavy duty space what we have encountered in the light duty space, which is multiple chargers. It makes it crazy that there's 3 different chargers: Tesla, CATM, OTCS. Let's avoid that in the medium and heavy duty space. And I think there's an appetite in the manufacturer side. We've been investing in a collaboration on this to avoid that debacle. What keeps me up at night is really, can we scale up at the speed that we need to avoid the worst consequences of climate change? That really, really keeps me up at night. I look at what the federal government is saying, 500,000 chargers, and I'm like, well, we could use all those chargers, because our recent analysis indicates we're going to need 1.2 million chargers by 2030 in the light duty space, and 157,000 chargers in the medium and heavy duty space by 2030. So we need a massive scale up.
Well, the most hopeful thing for me is that how rapidly the price of batteries has plummeted, defying the forecasts of experts and hopefully continuing to do so. Electrification of a large portion of the medium and heavy duty fleet now seems within reach. So the executive who told Chair Randolph, 1 foot here, 1 foot there, seems like there should be a foot and a half at least in the electric space. My biggest worries are who the Warriors are going to draft to play with Steph Curry next year. That's number one and most important. I have two worries though. Charging that fleet operators will charge at the same time, placing great strain on the grid, especially for fleets that have inflexible duty cycles, but we can manage around that. And I am worried about the risk of wildfires and outages interfering with the reliability of the grid and eroding consumer confidence just at the time we need it the most.
Great. Well, thank you. I probably should have asked it so we ended on a hopeful note, but the hopeful note being everybody working together. And I think that we really appreciate all of you joining. It's great to have the leadership fully engaged, and you guys are wonderful to work with and open-minded. And so just to drive home the point, we're very excited about where the market is going. There's a lot of work ahead. Infrastructure is a huge deal, both on hydrogen and plug-in, and we're looking forward to the rest of the day. So I think with that, we will hand it over to panel 2. And sorry, we went over by a minute.